Tragedy on a Manitoba highway, a fatal collision that's being called one of the worst in our province's history. And first responders here say they've never seen anything like it before.
This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Janet is away tonight. We begin with a tragic developing story. 15 people are dead after a serious crash between a semi-trailer truck and a handy transit vehicle in southwestern Manitoba. RCMP say the group was mostly seniors from the Dauphin area. CBC confirms they were on their way to the Sandhills Casino. The crash happened at the intersection of the Trans-Canada Highway and Highway 5 just north of Carberry around 11:40 this morning. That's roughly 150 kilometers west of Winnipeg. That's where our Alana Cole is tonight. Now, Alana, what can you tell us about the scene?
Well, you can see that there's an area here that remains taped off by police, and investigators are still on scene here tonight doing the delicate work that goes into investigating a crash like this. Now, we are trying to be very careful with what we show you here as it remains a graphic scene. But what we can tell you is that RCMP have confirmed that 15 people have died, 10 people were sent to hospital after a bus carrying approximately 25 people from Dauphin and surrounding area and a semi-truck collided. Now, it's believed that most of the people on that bus were seniors. Now, we've been told that a number of hospitals, including Health Sciences Centre, prepared for a mass casualty event. Stars Air Ambulance says that they sent 2 helicopters, 2 planes, and 14 critical care crew members.
This is certainly a large response by STAR standards. This is sort of in line with similar large incidents that we've responded to in the past, such as the tragedy with the Humboldt Broncos, the incident of James Smith Cremation, or in Alberta, the Icefields Parkway. So it's certainly a large response on the part of STARS and also, of course, the local EMS and first responders who are doing incredible work on the scene with our teams.
Now, CBC spoke with people who did drive by this scene after the crash happened. One man says that he saw multiple ambulances on the scene, 6 or 7, about 20 police vehicles, and he says he also saw a van or a bus on fire.
There was multiple people who had been pulled from that on the embankment of the highway. There was already tons of first responders there, but there was bodies on the road, mostly covered by blankets at that point, but there was multiple fatalities.
Now, RCMP say they have every available resource dedicated to this, and right now they are working closely with the medical examiner's office. Brittany?
All right, that's our Alana Cole tonight. Thank you so much, Alana. Well, CBC has confirmed Day & Ross is the trucking company involved in the crash. CEO William Doherty says they're heartbroken and their thoughts are with those who've lost loved ones. Doherty says they will fully cooperate with the investigation and assist in any way possible. Now, CBC's Josh Crabb was at an RCMP press conference late this afternoon. And Josh, what do we know so far about the victims?
Brittany, immediately RCMP said that people in the Dauphin area would be impacted by this crash. As you mentioned, the seniors are believed to be mostly from the Dauphin area, and they are seniors who we learned were on a bus on their way to the Sandhill Casino south of Carberry off the number 1 highway. We do know that RCMP expect a number of family members obviously are wondering about their loved ones. At this time, they didn't have much to share about the crash, but Superintendent Rob Lassant with the RCMP did provide a few details about what investigators know so far.
Semi-trailer was heading eastbound on Highway 1, and a bus carrying a number of senior citizens from Dauphin was headed southbound on Highway 5. The bus had already crossed the westbound lanes of Highway 1 and was crossing the eastbound lanes when it was struck by the semi. Immediately, it became apparent that this was a mass casualty situation.
RCMP say the drivers of both vehicles are alive and are in hospital. The 10 people who were injured, we didn't get an exact update on their condition at this time, but they're in hospitals around the province as they were taken from the scene to be treated for their injuries. Lynette Siragusa with Shared Health did say a lot of them had head injuries, but we don't, again, have conditions on the 10 people who were injured in this crash. Now, the RCMP says a family support center has been set up in Dauphin in the basement of the Lutheran Church. That's at 2 Kirby Avenue East. Officers are there who can answer questions for families who are concerned about their loved ones. Families can also call the support center at 204-647-5058, and they do say that next of kin are still being notified, and that could take some time.
All right, thanks so much, Josh, for that update. Well, Premier Heather Stephenson has expressed her sympathy in a statement. The Premier says our hearts are broken and our thoughts are with the families and loved ones of all the lives impacted by the horrific and devastating tragedy near the town of Carberry. I know our dedicated first responders and healthcare workers are doing all they can to assist, and I want to thank them on behalf of all Manitobans. She continues saying the flags at the Legislative Building have been lowered to half-mast out of respect for those who have tragically lost their lives. Bruce Pitt-Payne is a retired RCMP major crimes investigator and sergeant. He's been in these situations many times and can give us some insight into the investigation into the crash. Andrew Nichols reached him in Maple Ridge, BC earlier this afternoon.
What do you want to know? What are you looking for in terms of, how this happened?
Well, right now, it's an investigation is an investigation. I know I say this quite often, but they're going to first have to worry about public safety. That is their first main concern. But at the same time, they're juggling so many balls in the air, they must also look at the evidence not to accidentally wipe it out while they're doing their primary goal is saving people. So it's a very, very tricky situation that sure shows the critical thinking skills necessary to be a police officer when you have a situation like this. They're going to be looking for physical evidence. They're going to be eventually talking to as many people as possible, and then they'll try and figure out what actually happened. Tragic all the way around. I really feel for all the first responders right now as well, because it's going to affect them heavily. The first priority is always the public safety. So get everybody that they can to safety. And the second priority is preserving as much evidence as possible. As you can imagine, with so many first responders, inevitably they're going to be walking all over everything. They can't help that. They have to deal with the primary goal first. So they may lose a little evidence, but at least they may save some lives by going in that order. Wow, it must be overwhelming for them.
That was Bruce Pitt-Payne. He's a retired RCMP major crimes investigator and sergeant, and we'll have more on the crash later in our news program. Now to some more local news. Animal Services has seized a family of dogs after an attack that killed another dog. It happened in North Point Douglas last Thursday night. The CBC's Cam McLean brings us more.
This was the scene this morning at a house on Grove Street in Point Douglas. Animal Services seized multiple dogs after an attack last week that led to the death of another dog.
I couldn't stop crying for 2 days.
Last Thursday evening, Catherine Flynn was walking with her dog Carter when suddenly multiple dogs burst out of a yard and attacked.
They went for his neck, and they went for his belly and his groin, and his front quarters were all chewed up. He had a big tear under one arm. And then I didn't know what to do. I just sat there screaming with the dog as they're tearing my dog apart, quite literally.
Carter died from his injuries 2 days after the attack. Rosa Akerstream owns the dogs that attacked Carter.
I'm sorry this happened.
Flynn says she saw 3 dogs attack. Akerstream says she only owns 2 adult dogs, a male and female, who recently had puppies. She thinks the male was protecting the litter.
He's good dog, and I'm really sad they would take my animal away because I never had problems before.
The attack on Catherine Flynn's dog has raised wider concerns about how some dog owners here in Point Douglas are keeping their pets. People who we spoke to say they often see dogs kept in yards and not properly restrained, and they want to see the city bring in changes to keep people safe.
There's going to be a lot of fallout.
Catherine Bitney says she often avoids houses because dogs will sometimes charge at fences when she's walking by.
I think the city has to enact bylaws that insist that if you have guard dogs, they have to be in backyards with big high fences.
Spokesperson for the city wouldn't comment on the specifics about what happened in the attack on Grove Street. They say they're investigating. Flynn says she doesn't blame the dogs.
But these are rarely the dog's fault. I mean, this really has to fall on owners to care for them properly, raise them well, socialize them.
Meanwhile, Acrestream says she is going to fight to get her dogs back. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Manitoba housing apartment building designed for people with disabilities is now the subject of a human rights complaint alleging discrimination. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut explains why.
Sandy Reimer has no trouble moving around her Manitoba housing apartment because it was designed to be accessible for people living with disabilities. Reimer's leg was amputated above the knee when she was a baby. She mostly uses crutches to get around. Her service dog, Phoenix, helps out too. Reimer moved here in 2020 with hopes it would provide her a more comfortable life. So far it has. The only problem is she hasn't been able to get one of 8 indoor parking spots.
I can get handicapped accessible parking accommodation at my workplace. I can get handicapped accessible parking accommodation at the mall. I can get that at the grocery store. I can get handicapped accessible parking everywhere when I need it. But I can't get it in my home.
1010 Sinclair, the not-for-profit that manages the building, says 1 spot is assigned to the caretaker and the remaining 7 are for tenants with disabilities. Each one had to provide a doctor's note. Then the spaces were given out on a first-come, first-served basis. Reimer is next on the wait list, but there's no timeline for when she'll get a spot. In the meantime, she's parking outside, which she says has been treacherous in the winter.
In the past 2 years, I've had more than 100 falls. I've had more than 50 injuries. I've had more than 50 medical and treatment appointments.
She's since filed a complaint with the Manitoba Human Rights Commission. The War Amps of Canada is helping to advocate for Reimer.
We help amputees across the country with human rights situations like this, and I have never seen the level of callousness and disregard for someone's safety as I have with 1010 Sinclair and now, unfortunately, with Manitoba Housing.
1010 Sinclair says there isn't much more it can do. Executive Director Debbie Von Ettinger says the company has increased snow removal around Reimer's outdoor parking spot and let her choose a space she wanted so she could be closer to the building entrance. It also tried to see if anyone would be willing to give up their indoor spots for her.
We did phone a number of tenants and asked them if they were prepared to give up their spot. What we can't do is challenge medical notes. We're not medical professionals, and we certainly are not able to decide on those grounds who should get the spots.
Manitoba Housing says it's aware of the situation and has been working with 1010 Sinclair to find an acceptable solution. A spokesperson said, unfortunately, there is a limited number of underground parking spots and a wait list.
Reimer was hoping the Manitoba Human Rights Commission would help her get a parking spot sooner, but has been told it'll be about 2 years before an investigator is assigned to her complaint. After that, there's no telling how long it'll take before her case is heard.
In the meantime, Reimer is glad it's summer now, so she won't have to deal with the snow for at least a few more months. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba is expanding a service that gives mental health care to people at home. In Selkirk this morning, Mental Health Minister Janice Morley-Lecomte announced $2.4 million in annual funding. The money will expand 2 existing programs, an initial assessment done by video, and a virtual crisis stabilization unit that provides follow-up care like daily phone calls. Jen Dedeli has recently used these programs to help pull her out of depression. She says it's worked faster than she could have imagined.
Helps you to open up more. I mean, it might not help everybody, but it did help me. And I was very skeptical just based on the fact that I don't have this human connection. Well, I did have a human connection. I was speaking to someone on the other end of the phone and got to see someone virtually as well.
The programs will be expanded with 4 more hours a day and about 6 more staff. Now, some call it the official start to the summer festival season. The Winnipeg International Jazz Festival kicked off last night. More than 100 acts will perform at the festival, which runs until Saturday, June 24th. Musical styles range from country to African to hip-hop, and of course, there's lots of jazz. Dozens of free shows take place in Old Market Square in the Exchange District, featuring some of Winnipeg's finest, like Métis singer-songwriter Brandy Vizina.
The energy, the vibe, the lights, the family feel, it's all super encompassing and beautiful.
Other local acts hitting the stage at the Cube include Ariel Posen, Dr. Henry Band, and this group, Leaf Rapids headliners for the indoor concerts include Angelique Kidjo, Postmodern Jukebox, and the Sun Ra Orchestra. All right, meteorologist John Sauter joins us now, and you know what? Weather's looking pretty good to be out there for Jazz Fest.
Yeah, actually, it will be great for this evening. You know, a little bit warmer than last night, but the kickoff
it seems a little less hazy too.
Yeah, a little less hazy. Yeah. All right, let's get to some weather. We've got current conditions for you now. 22 degrees in Winnipeg at the moment. The dew point 8, so it is dry out there. And again, our temperatures kind of struggled today because of that smoky haze in the air, which was worse in western Manitoba. And I'll show you some graphics and some forecast conditions coming up shortly that'll show where that smoke is headed, because I think it's going to be a little thicker here in the southeast tomorrow. Southeast winds right now at 15, relative humidity down there at 41%. This is the smoke plume forecast. This is from Environment Canada. It's called the smoke model. That's what I call it anyway. But you can see that early this morning, most of the haze and smoke was in the west, but that will change as we head into Friday morning. You can see this shifting off to the east a little bit and things clearing up in the southwest. So a brighter day on the way for areas like Brandon and Dauphin, carrying on right through into Friday evening, and then Saturday morning. It'll be off into southeastern Manitoba, northwestern Ontario as we head into the weekend. Right now, the only watch or advisory we have for special air quality would be in northwestern Ontario and north of Kenora. And this is from fires in northwestern Ontario. So some smoky conditions in that area, and the smoke has settled down to the ground. I've been talking this week about a frontal system that's moving into western Manitoba, and we saw a little bit of that today, but it really starts to move to the east as we head into Friday and Friday afternoon. These showers, I checked, there was no lightning in them earlier, and you can see how they've been dissipating through the day today. Now, as we move through the night tonight, we'll get partly cloudy skies here in the Red River Valley, and then by the morning, the rain is east of Brandon, over Portage La Prairie, and areas like Carman and down through Morden and Winkler, and then we get into the middle of the day, and it has moved through the Winnipeg area. And you can really draw a line here. This is the cold front, and that's low right now that's in Saskatchewan is moving up into northern Manitoba. And then as we get into later on Friday, there's Friday afternoon, and then on through the evening, this all gently moves off to the east. Saturday in the morning, we may see some showers and cloud in cottage areas to the east, but nice bright skies out to the west and through central Manitoba, and a little bit of rain moving through into the north on Saturday. So we do have some chances of showers here on Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon. Saturday afternoon is very slight, though, and Sunday would be about a 40% chance. 13 tonight, partly cloudy. And we're at 16 in the morning, south winds 15 to 20, but the winds go really light in the afternoon. I think hazy, 22 once again, and mainly cloudy with a few scattered showers on Friday afternoon, then again on Saturday, and as mentioned, again on Sunday. But then we start to warm up. 31 on Monday, Tuesday is going to be even warmer, Brittany. So if you like the much warmer weather, it is going to return starting early next week.
All right. Thanks so much, John. We'll check in a little bit later in the newscast with you.
Thanks.
Well, as you saw earlier, a tragedy on our Manitoba highways. We'll have more on the crash that left 15 people dead near Carberry today. CBC crews are on the scene, and we'll bring you the latest after the break. "15 people are dead after a serious crash between a semi-trailer truck and a handy transit vehicle in southwestern Manitoba. RCMP say the group was mostly seniors from the Dauphin area. CBC confirms they were on their way to the Sand Hills Casino. The crash happened at the intersection of the Trans-Canada Highway and Highway 5 just north of Carberry around 11:40 this morning. That's roughly 150 kilometers west of Winnipeg. That's where our Alana Cole is tonight. Alana, what can you tell us about the scene?
Well, as you can see, an area here where the crash happened remains taped off by police, and investigators are still here on scene doing the delicate work that goes into investigating something like this. That includes major crimes and the forensic collision reconstruction team. Now, we're being careful with how much we show you here tonight as it remains a graphic scene, but here is what we can tell you. RCMP confirmed 15 people are dead and 10 were taken to hospital after a bus carrying about 25 people from Dauphin and surrounding areas and a semi-trailer collided. Now, hospitals prepared for a mass casualty event, and Stars Air Ambulance tells us that they sent 2 helicopters, 2 planes, and 14 critical care crew members.
This is certainly a large response by STAR standards. This is sort of in line with similar large incidents that we've responded to in the past, such as the tragedy with the Humboldt Broncos, the incident of James Smith Cremation, or in Alberta, the Icefields Parkway. So it's certainly a large response on the part of STARS and also, of course, the local EMS and first responders who are doing incredible work on the scene with our teams.
CBC spoke with people who drove by this crash after it happened. One man told us that there was multiple ambulances on scene. He said 6 or 7, about 20 police vehicles. And he said he saw a bus or van on fire.
There was multiple people who had been pulled from that on the embankment of the highway. There was already tons of first responders there, but there was bodies on the road, mostly covered by blankets at that point, but there was multiple fatalities.
RCMP say that they have all available resources dedicated to this, that they're working closely with the Office of the Medical Examiner, and that they're also working to get information to loved ones who are waiting to see what happened. Brittany?
All right, that's our Alana Cole near Carberry tonight, where 15 people are dead in a serious collision. Thanks, Alana. The federal government has tabled a widely anticipated bill to help the transition to a green economy. The legislation aims to move workers away from the oil and gas industry and toward clean energy jobs. CBC's Terry Reith has more from Edmonton.
The new legislation, Bill C-50, sets out the transition to a low-carbon future. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson stressing that this is being driven by a global transition, that international investment is steering away from oil and gas and more towards alternative energies. And what we're talking about here that he says we have to seize opportunities in are things like hydrogen, critical minerals, renewable energy, and small modular reactors. Wilkinson says this is all about strengthening the economy and cleaning up the environment for future generations.
The good news is that Canada is extraordinarily well positioned to take advantage of the opportunities that will come through the transition to a low-carbon future.
Today's legislation doesn't set out any specifics, but it does create a pathway and some timelines. 2 years, so the end of 2025, to come up with an action plan. This will be done in conjunction with provinces, unions, and Indigenous peoples. As for Alberta energy workers who are worried about their jobs, Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan has this message.
I say to them, this puts them in the driver's seat. They will lead the energy transition. That's not rhetoric. They're sick of rhetoric. This is going to be law.
Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, who has vowed to fight any federal legislation that she believes will infringe on Alberta's oil and gas industry, sent out a statement today stating Alberta will not recognize, cooperate with, or enforce any attempt to phase out our province's oil and gas industry or its workforce. This is non-negotiable. Smith will be meeting with Wilkinson on Monday, so stay tuned. Terry Reith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino dodged questions today and was unable to explain why he was not informed by his office earlier about serial killer and rapist Paul Bernardo's prison transfer. It comes after news that the Prime Minister's office also said it knew back in March about a possible transfer. Ashley Burke has the latest on the political firestorm unfolding on Parliament Hill.
What happened in your office, Minister? Good morning.
A cabinet minister in crisis, facing growing calls to step down.
Will he do the honorable thing and resign right here, right now?
I'm focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is doing my job.
Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino called to testify at a parliamentary committee on foreign interference, but couldn't escape questions about his latest controversy, Paul Bernardo. Mendicino said he didn't know about Bernardo's prison transfer until after it happened, despite his office and the Prime Minister's office both saying they were given advance warning back in March.
There is no doubt in my mind, Madam Chair, that the Minister had the information about this transfer.
That question is so is riddled with inaccuracies and falsehoods, it doesn't even begin to warrant an answer.
Mendicino gave a brief statement.
I've taken the corrective steps to ensure that that does not happen again.
Then tried to avoid taking any questions from journalists.
Is it a standard operating procedure at your office that you are kept in the dark? And will you let anyone go in response to the handling of this?
Of course not. And my job as the Minister of Public Safety is to make sure that we are identifying issues where there are challenges on information flow.
Mendicino unable to explain why he says staff didn't brief him for nearly 90 days.
There should be consequences in his office, certainly, but this is a broader problem within this government.
Did you fire someone if they didn't give you such information?
As ministers, we're ultimately responsible for what happens in our offices.
Then Mendicino took a back seat in question period, letting the House Leader answer the opposition leader.
His office knew 3 months beforehand, and his cabinet has the power to direct the correctional authorities to keep mass murderers in maximum security prisons.
It's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition mischaracterized what happened. He knows very well that Correctional Services Canada makes those decisions independently.
The question now is, does the Prime Minister still have confidence in Mendicino? And will he come out now and publicly defend him or not? Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
7 million Canadians do not have a family doctor. The problem is particularly acute for those who live outside a major city. One Canadian medical school was established to directly address the issue. After 15 years of graduating doctors, it appears to be working. David Common has this report from Northern Ontario.
What's going on? What's brought you into emergency today?
The emergency room in Sioux Lookout, Ontario is rarely quiet, seeing patients from across Northern Ontario. Like many rural and remote areas, getting doctors to live here is a major challenge. Do you think you'll ever work in a Toronto hospital?
Definitely not Toronto.
Dr. Brenna Duffy is bucking the trend. She only wants to work in smaller communities.
No offense to my urban colleagues, but I just don't feel like you would get the same kind of challenges and interest. I mean, like I said, we have such complicated cases. It makes medicine fun. Come with me over to the board.
Dr. Duffy is a graduate of the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. Now in its 15th year, it's doubling its student intake and finding success with its model, recruiting future doctors who come from smaller communities, training them away from big city hospitals so they'll stay rural and remote when they graduate. Do you think what you've got is the solution?
I think it's part of the solution.
Doctor and school dean Sarita Verma calls it the No Ordinary School of Medicine, in part because students spend much less time in a classroom.
Traditional healers can come and make their medicines because
90% of the patients here are Indigenous. Many of the doctors are not. This training intended to bridge their worlds.
that's the birch bark fungus. It's really high in antioxidants.
blood sugar.
At the nearby Lac Seul First Nation, soon-to-be doctors Rosemary Rankin and Tafim Unnisa are halfway through a 4-week live-in immersion on the reserve to better understand the communities they'll eventually serve. Tafim is from Timmins, Ontario.
There's such a lack of healthcare due to the geographical limitations of Northern Ontario, and it made me want to, pursue it.
We hear so much about crisis and failure inside Canada's medical system, but this approach is finding success and getting noticed by other medical schools nationwide. Students and graduates are keen to celebrate it. David Common, CBC News, Sioux Lookout, Ontario.
Officials are calling the sinking of a crowded fishing boat off the Greek coast one of the worst disasters in the area in years. Rescuers were able to save nearly 80 people, but now officials believe there may have been hundreds more on the board, including women and children. Chris Brown hears from aid workers and survivors as they struggle to come to grips with the magnitude of the loss.
With hope of finding anyone else alive in the sea off Greece gone, all that is left is to collect bodies. 700 people may have been on board, but there are only 100 or so survivors.
Someone was telling me that the moment things happened, it was so quick that they were shouting, they were trying to catch to one another, just to jump, take off their clothes, not to have weight.
One young man started to cry and said, "I need my mother." This was a very difficult moment. I need my mother. This voice is inside my ears.
Horribly, survivors told Greek doctors that the hold of the ship was full of children, more than 100. And although that number cannot be independently verified, Save the Children says it fears there was an immense loss of young lives.
Yeah, it's shocking and horrifying. And from Save the Children's perspective, what we really want to emphasize and remember is that these people who died have names, they have families.
Qassam Abu Zaid, a Syrian who lives in Germany, said he paid $4,500 for his now missing wife to make the trip.
شو بتقول مشاعره؟ أكيد مشاعر ما في مشاعر تحكي.
How would I feel? I lost my wife now. I don't know where is she now. So of course. It's my wife.
There's been some criticism of Greece's Coast Guard that it intercepted the decrepit vessel but didn't stop it. But Greek authorities say the ship was in international waters and legally they did all they could.
If people are forced to take these routes in this way and being exploited under these conditions, we will continue to have such deadly incidents.
There have been several arrests on suspicion of trafficking people across the Mediterranean, the most dangerous migrant crossing in the world. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
After days churning across the Arabian Sea, Cyclone Biparjoy is due to make landfall, and it has people in both India and Pakistan preparing to see how hard the cyclone hits. CBC's Salima Shivji has more from Delhi.
The sea surges and waves crash onto the shore, bringing chaos to the coasts of both India and Pakistan. The cyclone called Biparjoy, meaning disaster in Bengali, threatening to live up to its name. It's been brewing in the Arabian Sea for days, gathering force, becoming one of the most fierce cyclones in the past 25 years. For officials, it's not just the relentless rains they fear in Biparjoy's wake, it's the possibility of flash floods inundating low-lying areas and devastating winds destroying homes.
It will gradually increase. It will become 115 to 125 kilometers per hour, gusting to 140 kilometers per hour sometimes.
For the tens of thousands of people who had to flee their homes as the cyclone approached, taking shelter far from the shore, it's still a waiting game to see how much damage the storm will wreak. We're poor, we depend on our animals. I don't know what will happen next, this woman says. That same shock and uncertainty reigns at this relief camp across the border in Pakistan's Sindh province, an area still recovering from deadly floods last fall. We're doomed, says Wilayat Bibi, 80 years old and the matriarch of a fishing family. When the cyclone has come and gone, how will we feed our children, she says. We'll be left with nothing, no boats, no huts. As despair begins to set in here, officials are warning the storm will get worse. It's expected to batter the area for 2 or 3 more days before abating. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
Coming up, crossing the Atlantic Ocean in a hot air balloon. Well, some might call it crazy, but this British couple say it's magical, and they're hoping to set 2 world records while they're at it. That story after the break. Stay with us. A British couple are in Canada waiting for the right winds to whisk them away from a pit stop on the East Coast. They have high hopes of setting 2 world records as they cross the Atlantic Ocean in a balloon. Now, some might call it crazy, but the pilot and her blind co-pilot call it magical.
Here's our home for an indeterminate period. The bunk or bench, it's padded. One of us at night would sleep on that Here, that'll be our cooking table. There's Deborah's control panel with the instruments on it.
We wanted to do something that hadn't been done before, and this, whilst a woman has been across, it's not a first from that perspective, no woman has captained a flight across the Atlantic.
And they didn't have a blind crew person.
We went on standby from June 7th, and now we're waiting for the right weather system to take us across.
A steady flow, really, isn't it? 4 days, we think, would be the shortest time, and longest 7 or 8. We don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting, and then I think when I look up and just see stars, that will be amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Because I've never seen unpolluted sky. You know, almost everywhere you go in Britain, I can't think of somewhere where we could go where there won't be light pollution. Everybody here is really helpful. It's a very friendly town. We've had a great welcome since we've been here. People in cafes have said hello and, oh, you're doing that, yeah. And people volunteered to help on the day.
It's not something you can describe, but most people, once they go in a balloon, it is just this awe. It is a fantastic way to travel. You'll go with the wind, there's no noise. I don't know how to describe it really, it's quite magical.
Well, our meteorologist John Sauter is back, and it sounds like an incredible adventure, but I am going to say better than me.
Have you been in a balloon before?
I have. It was one that was tethered down.
Oh,
and
okay.
You know what, I have to say, I don't know why I did it, because I'm petrified of heights.
Really?
Yeah, but we got up to the top, and I kind of hid in the corner and like peeked my head up over just so I could see him back, and then peeked it up, and then went down until it came back.
But it tethered the whole time?
It was tethered. It was up, but tethered,
yeah.
so that we couldn't fly away. What about you?
I had one balloon ride a long time ago. It was fantastic, it really was. But the landing, not so much. The landing was more of a drag in the mud, but yeah, that happens.
So we're going to leave it to them.
Yeah, we are. Let's get to the Manitoba weather. We'll start with current conditions. 22 in Winnipeg, best we did today. And yeah, lots of 21s and 22s on the map. And, you know, the temperature is still being held back a little bit by the smoky haze that is above us. Can't really smell it. May get into that kind of condition tomorrow as some smoke in southwestern Manitoba makes a little transition over to the east for Friday and likely on into Saturday. So temperatures look like this: 22s, 23s, Melita at 20 degrees, Sprague at 19, 21s in Kenora and Red Lake at 19 in Barons River. And these are the current numbers across the north. Lots of 20s here, pretty warm actually. Churchill at 15, a warmer day on the way in Churchill tomorrow. Now that frontal system I was talking about is just moving right down through the western side of the province really. The low, the center of the low, is in northern Saskatchewan and moving up into Manitoba like this. So all of this cloud will gently make its way across into southeastern Manitoba, northwestern Ontario, but not likely until tomorrow in these regions. A low of 12 in Kenora under clear skies, 7 in Fort Francis, and clear in 9 in Dryden. Southeastern Manitoba and the Red River Valley, we're looking at a low of 13 in Winnipeg. Last night we dropped down to about 11, so not quite that cool, but still on the cool side for this time of year. Normal low would be 11, actually. A few showers possible around Brandon, although you look on radar and not really seeing too much of that at the moment. So any showers you see be more like a sprinkle at this point. To the north, we've got windy conditions again in Churchill, southeast 30 to 50. A few showers around Lynn Lake tonight and Flin Flon. The rest of the regions just partly cloudy skies. And then as we head through into the day tomorrow, back into the 20s. And look at Churchill at 22, a chance of an afternoon shower or thunderstorm. Sunny in 22 in the Paw, in Flin Flon. And then the Paw is a sun cloud mix in 23. Same with Norway House, but we could see afternoon showers, Thompson, and then out to the east, and in some cases, an isolated thunderstorm. Here across the south, a chance of scattered showers is really to the east. We'll see some sunny breaks, or at least a sun-cloud mix in the west, but for us, it looks like middle of the day, and just a scattered shower. Not a washout by any stretch, and then we've got dry conditions in northwestern Ontario. It'll be evening before we see anything moving into that region.
All right, thanks so much, John.
You bet.
Well, we've been telling you all evening about a horrible crash. We'll have more on that crash that left multiple people dead. It happened on the Trans-Canada Highway near Carberry today. CBC crews are on scene. We'll bring you the latest after the break. "15 people are dead after a serious crash between a semi-trailer truck and a handy transit vehicle in southwestern Manitoba. RCMP say the group was mostly seniors from the Dauphin area. CBC confirms they were on their way to Sandhills Casino. The crash happened at the intersection of the Trans-Canada Highway and Highway 5 just north of Carberry around 11:40 this morning. That's roughly 150 kilometers west of Winnipeg. That's where our Alana Cole has been all day and is there tonight. Alana, what can you tell us about the scene?
Well, if you look behind me, you can see a scene remains taped off by police, and investigators are still on scene here. That includes the forensic collision reconstruction team and major crimes. Now, we are being careful with what we show you here, as it was a graphic scene when we got here today. But what we can tell you is that RCMP say 15 people have died and 10 people were taken to hospital after a bus carrying about 25 people from Dauphin and the surrounding area and a semi-truck collided. Now, STARS says that they sent 2 helicopters as well as 2 planes and 14 critical care crew members.
This is certainly a large response by STAR standards. This is sort of in line with similar large incidents that we've responded to in the past, such as the tragedy with the Humboldt Broncos, the incident of James Smith Cree Nation, or in Alberta, the Icefields Parkway. So it's certainly a large response on the part of STARS and also, of course, the local EMS and first responders who are doing incredible work on the scene with our teams.
CBC did speak with people who drove past the crash after it happened. One man told us that there were multiple ambulances on scene. He estimated 6 or 7. He said about 20 police vehicles were also on scene, and he said that he saw a bus or van on fire.
There was multiple people who had been pulled from that on the embankment of the highway. There was already tons of first responders there, but there was bodies on the road, mostly covered by blankets at that point, but there was multiple fatalities.
RCMP say all available resources are dedicated to this. They say that they're working closely with the medical examiner's office. They're also working to try to get information to people about their loved ones. And we do know that an information center for families has been set up at a church in Dauphin. Brittany?
All right, that's our Alana Cole near Carberry tonight. Thanks so much, Alana. Well, you can head to our website for more information on that crash. We need to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Well, here's your 7-day forecast. And the rain you see here over the next few days is just a sprinkle here and there. I think we'll see some occasional showers tomorrow, likely midday to afternoon. And we start to warm up a bit on Sunday. There's about a 40% chance of a shower. Then the heat arrives. 31 on Monday, 32 and windy on Tuesday. A chance of thunderstorms on Wednesday. And then Thursday, again, a chance of showers in the afternoon.
Looks like a nice forecast. Yeah. Well, of course, we've been bringing you news all day about that horrible crash near Carberry. We will have the latest all throughout the evening. You can go to our website, cbc.ca. And of course, Emily Brass will be back with all of the latest tonight at 11. We hope you all have a wonderful evening. We'll see you back here again tomorrow.
Good night.